Chapter 1. Accept responsibility for how your days go. Chapter 1 begins with a truth that many people resist because it removes comfort and excuses. The quality of your life is shaped far more by how you take responsibility for your days than by talent, luck, intelligence, or circumstance. Not the rare dramatic days, not the moments that feel important in hindsight, but the ordinary days that repeat quietly and consistently. Most people underestimate how powerful an average day really is. They believe life changes only when something big happens, when motivation suddenly appears, when circumstances improve, or when they finally feel ready. But real change rarely announces itself. It happens when small decisions are made intentionally, again and again, even when no one is watching. Responsibility is the moment you stop seeing your days as something that happened to you and start seeing them as something you actively shape. This does not mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong, and it does not mean carrying guilt for mistakes. Responsibility is ownership. Ownership means recognizing that while you may not control everything that enters your life, you do control how you respond, how you choose, and how you act. Many people delay action while waiting for motivation, better conditions, or approval from others. They tell themselves tomorrow will be easier, next week will feel different, or someday they will finally feel ready. But hope without action quietly keeps people stuck in the same patterns. The moment you accept responsibility, you stop waiting and start leading yourself. And that shift is not loud or dramatic. It feels serious and grounding, like realizing your life is moving in the direction of your daily habits, whether you are paying attention or not. And that realization changes how you see every day that follows. Every morning you wake up with a fresh page, and that page will be filled no matter what. The only question is who will write it. Some people hand that page over to the world. They let notifications, moods, other people's demands, and distractions decide how the day unfolds. They start reacting before they even realize it, checking messages, scrolling feeds, responding to urgency instead of intention. By the time the day ends, they feel tired and unsatisfied, not because they did nothing, but because they did nothing deliberately. Others pick up the pen themselves. They may not control every detail, but they decide how the day will begin and what deserves their energy. That simple decision changes how the day feels. When you take responsibility for your days, patterns stop forming without your consent. Without responsibility, you wake up late, rush through mornings, delay important work, and promise yourself you will fix it tomorrow. Tomorrow then quietly becomes a copy of today. Over time, these repeated patterns harden into habits, and those habits shape a life you did not consciously choose. Responsibility is noticing these patterns and deciding they matter enough to change. People often say they do not have enough time, but time is rarely the real problem. The problem is how time is treated. When you live without responsibility, time slips away unnoticed. When you live with responsibility, time becomes intentional. You begin to see that even difficult days still belong to you, and stressful weeks still respond to your choices. Responsibility does not mean controlling everything that happens. It means controlling how you respond, and your response shapes who you become over time. Responsibility also changes how you experience failure. Instead of seeing failure as proof that you are incapable, irresponsible, or inconsistent, you begin to see it as information, feedback, a signal that something needs adjustment. When you stop blaming your mood, your past, or your circumstances, you gain freedom. Freedom comes from knowing you always have a next move, even after mistakes. A productive life is not built by doing more. It is built by doing what matters with intention. Responsibility forces you to decide what actually matters. It sharpens your priorities and clears away noise. It helps you say no to distractions without guilt and yes to effort without hesitation. When you accept responsibility, you stop saying tomorrow will fix it. Tomorrow fixes nothing. Today builds tomorrow. The way you handle the first hour of your day often determines the direction of the next 12. When the first hour is lost to distraction or reaction, the rest of the day feels rushed before it even starts. When the first hour is claimed intentionally, the rest of the day becomes easier to guide. Responsibility also changes how you speak to yourself. Instead of harsh self-criticism, you practice honest evaluation. You learn to say this worked and this didn't, without drama or self-punishment. That kind of inner dialogue builds resilience. It keeps you grounded even when progress feels slow. Many people wait for pressure to push them into action, but pressure without responsibility builds frustration. Responsibility turns pressure into progress. It turns chaos into clarity and gives you stability, even when life feels demanding. Your days are made of small choices that seem insignificant in the moment but are powerful over time. What you eat, what you read, who you listen to, how long you stay on your phone, how you respond when things feel difficult. These choices are not neutral. They are votes for the kind of life you are building. Responsibility is casting those votes on purpose instead of by default. There is a quiet pride that comes from knowing you showed up for your day, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but honestly. You did what you said you would do. You honored commitments, including the ones no one else sees. That pride builds confidence, and confidence is not loud. It is steady. When people avoid responsibility, they also avoid growth. Growth requires effort, and effort requires ownership. The moment you say this is on me is the moment growth begins. Responsibility brings freedom because when you stop blaming, you stop feeling trapped. You realize you have options. You may not like all of them, but you have them, and choice is freedom. Each day quietly asks a question: will you lead or will you drift? Drifting is easy and requires no effort. Leadership starts with self-leadership, deciding priorities before the world decides for you. Responsibility does not demand perfection. It demands presence. Some days will go off track, and that is part of being human. Responsibility means returning without drama, without quitting, and without punishment. Your future is built quietly in mornings, evenings, and moments when no one is watching. Responsibility makes those moments count. If you want more control, start with responsibility. If you want more results, start with responsibility. If you want more meaning, start with responsibility. Your life does not improve by chance. It improves by choice, and those choices begin today. Chapter 2. Train yourself to act despite resistance. Chapter 2 focuses on a truth that most people avoid because it removes comfort. Progress does not come from feeling ready, motivated, or confident. It comes from action taken in spite of resistance. Every human being experiences resistance. It is the invisible force that pulls you toward comfort, delay, and avoidance. It shows up when the alarm rings and staying in bed feels easier, when you know what needs to be done but distraction feels more appealing, when effort feels heavy and postponement feels justified. Resistance is not weakness. It is not a flaw in your character. It is part of being human. The problem is not that resistance exists, but that most people allow it to decide their actions. They wait for motivation to arrive, believing that once they feel ready, everything will become easier. But motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with mood, energy, and circumstance. If your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. People who live productive lives understand a different truth. Action comes first. Feeling follows. You do not wait until resistance disappears. You train yourself to move forward while resistance is present. Discipline is not something you are born with. It is not a personality trait reserved for a few. Discipline is a skill, and like any skill, it is built through repetition. Each time you choose action over avoidance, you strengthen that skill. Each time you delay, you weaken it. Resistance often disguises itself as logic, telling you to wait until conditions improve or until you feel more prepared. But preparation without action becomes procrastination. The moment you act despite resistance, even in a small way, you break its hold and begin building momentum, which is the real foundation of discipline and confidence. Resistance often feels strongest before you begin. Before action, your mind exaggerates difficulty and discomfort. It tells you the task will be exhausting, overwhelming, or pointless. But once you start, something important happens. Resistance weakens. Focus replaces hesitation. What felt heavy becomes manageable. This is why starting is more important than finishing. Once you begin, momentum takes over. That is why people who wait for motivation remain stuck, while those who act despite resistance keep moving forward. The key is not to fight resistance in massive battles. The key is to lower the barrier to action. When your mind says, skip the workout, move for 5 minutes. When it says, avoid the work, open the document and write one sentence. When it says, wait until tomorrow, take one step today. Small actions bypass resistance. They make progress unavoidable. Every small action sends a message to your mind that you are someone who shows up even when it is uncomfortable. Over time, this identity replaces hesitation. Acting despite resistance also changes how you see yourself. Each time you act when you don't feel like it, you gather evidence that you can do hard things. That evidence builds confidence far more effectively than positive thinking or motivation ever could. Confidence is not built before action. It is built through action. This is why productive people do not rely on how they feel. They rely on what they decided. They act according to intention, not emotion. Emotion fluctuates. Intention creates stability. The more often you act despite resistance, the quieter resistance becomes. It does not disappear, but it loses authority over your behavior, and that shift changes everything. Resistance also reveals where growth is needed most. Pay attention to where you hesitate, where you delay repeatedly, and where you make excuses. These patterns are not random. They show you the areas where comfort has replaced commitment. Awareness is not judgment. It is information. Once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Many people believe discipline is punishment, forcing yourself to do things you hate. In reality, discipline is care. It is choosing what you want most over what you want now. It is leading yourself instead of abandoning yourself. Acting despite resistance is an act of self-respect. It means you value your future enough to move forward even when the present moment feels uncomfortable. There will be days when your energy is low and your mood is off. Those days matter more than the easy ones. Not because you will perform perfectly, but because you will prove to yourself that progress does not require perfect conditions. Showing up imperfectly is still showing up. That consistency builds trust in yourself. Over time, you stop negotiating with your discomfort. You stop asking whether you should act. You simply act. That is how discipline becomes automatic. That is how resistance loses power. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in the presence of fear. Strength is not comfort. Strength is movement through discomfort. Every time you choose to act despite resistance, you expand your capacity and become more resilient, more grounded, and more capable than before. Build your day around actions, not moods. Moods change constantly. Plans create stability. When you follow your plan even when resistance appears, you regain control of your life. This control is not rigid. It is intentional. You still rest. You still pause. But you do so consciously, not by default or escape. Learn the difference between rest and avoidance. Rest restores energy. Avoidance drains it. When you rest on purpose, you return stronger. When you avoid, resistance grows louder. Over time, acting despite resistance becomes part of who you are. You stop waiting for perfect timing. You stop needing motivation to begin. You move when it matters. That movement compounds. One disciplined choice strengthens the next. What once felt difficult becomes normal. You will not always feel ready. That is expected. You will not always feel motivated. That is normal. But you can always choose to act. One step today, one step tomorrow. Those steps form a pattern. That pattern becomes your character, and your character determines the direction of your life. Growth demands movement. Resistance is simply the test. Pass it often enough and it no longer controls you. You were not built for comfort alone. You were built to grow. Acting despite resistance is how you become the person you are capable of being. Chapter 3. Create structure that reduces mental overload. Chapter 3 is about understanding why so many people feel mentally exhausted even when they have not done much physical work, and the answer lies in mental overload. Mental overload is not laziness, lack of discipline, or lack of intelligence. It is the result of carrying too many decisions, too many open loops, and too many competing priorities inside your mind at the same time. When your brain is constantly switching between thoughts, tasks, reminders, worries, and unfinished plans, even simple actions begin to feel heavy. Most people try to solve this by pushing harder, working longer, or criticizing themselves for not being focused enough. But effort alone cannot fix overload. Structure is what reduces mental strain. Structure does not mean controlling every minute of your day or turning your life into a rigid schedule. Structure means clarity. It means deciding in advance what matters, so your mind does not have to solve the same problems again and again throughout the day. When you wake up without structure, your brain immediately enters reaction mode. It responds to whatever is loudest, closest, or most urgent, and that constant reaction drains energy. Over time, this creates the feeling of being busy but unproductive. Structure gives your mind boundaries. It tells your brain when to focus, when to rest, and what deserves attention. That sense of order allows your mental energy to be used for meaningful work instead of wasted on endless decision-making. And once mental noise is reduced, focus becomes natural instead of forced. One of the biggest contributors to mental overload is decision fatigue. Every decision you make, no matter how small, uses mental energy. What to wear, what to eat, what to respond to, what to do next, and what to ignore all demand attention. When your day has no structure, these decisions pile up early, long before you reach the work that actually matters. By the time you try to focus, your energy is already depleted. Structure protects your focus by reducing unnecessary decisions. This is why routines are powerful. A simple morning routine, repeated daily, signals stability to your brain. It removes uncertainty and creates momentum. The same applies to focused work blocks. When you decide in advance when you will work deeply and what you will work on, your mind relaxes because it does not have to negotiate with itself. Structure also includes your physical environment. Clutter creates mental noise, even when you are not consciously aware of it. A messy space pulls your attention in multiple directions, making it harder to concentrate. Clearing your workspace is not about perfection. It is about reducing friction. When your environment supports focus, your mind follows. Writing things down is another critical part of structure. Your brain is not designed to store endless reminders and tasks. When you rely on memory, your mind stays tense, constantly checking what might be forgotten. Offloading tasks into a notebook or system frees mental space, allowing you to stay present with what you are doing instead of worrying about what you might be missing. Technology is one of the most powerful sources of mental overload in modern life. Notifications, messages, emails, and constant connectivity fragment attention and train the brain to expect interruption. Without structure, technology controls your focus instead of supporting it. Structure means deciding when and how you engage with digital tools instead of reacting constantly. Turning off non-essential notifications, closing unused tabs, and setting specific times to check messages creates mental safety. When your brain knows interruptions are limited, it relaxes and concentrates more deeply. Structure also requires intentional rest. Productivity is not about constant action. It is about managing energy. Without planned breaks, mental fatigue builds and focus collapses. Short pauses, quiet moments, walking, or simply sitting without stimulation allow your mind to reset. This is not wasted time. It is maintenance. Evenings are another overlooked area of structure. When you end the day without closure, your mind carries unfinished thoughts into rest, disrupting recovery. A simple evening reset, reviewing what was done and planning what comes next, clears mental clutter, and prepares your mind for the following day. Anxiety often comes from not knowing what to do next. Structure reduces anxiety by making the next step clear. You do not have to think about everything at once. You only focus on what is scheduled now, and that containment makes challenges feel manageable instead of overwhelming. Structure should fit your life, not someone else's. Copying complex systems that do not match your energy or responsibilities only creates more stress. Effective structure is simple, flexible, and supportive. It works with your natural rhythms instead of fighting them. Start small. One routine, one focus block, one place to capture tasks. Do not try to organize your entire life in one day. The goal of structure is to reduce mental load, not add pressure. When structure is working, you feel calmer, clearer, and more grounded. Decisions feel easier. Focus lasts longer. You stop feeling constantly behind. Structure does not remove challenges, but it changes how you experience them. It turns chaos into order and effort into progress. Willpower is fragile. Structure is reliable. When discipline feels low, structure carries you forward. Over time, structure fades into the background while clarity remains. Mental overload is not a personal failure. It is a signal that structure is missing. When you respond to that signal intentionally, your mind becomes an ally instead of an obstacle. You think better, decide better, and live better. Not because life became easier, but because your inner world became more organized and supportive of the life you are building. Chapter 4. Build self-trust through kept promises. A productive life does not begin with motivation, talent, or perfect conditions. It begins with awareness. Awareness of how you are spending your days and whether those days are actually moving you toward the life you want. Many people stay busy from morning to night, yet feel strangely unsatisfied when the day ends. That feeling is not caused by laziness or lack of effort. It comes from living reactively instead of intentionally. When you do not decide how your day will be used, the world decides for you. Messages, distractions, moods, and urgency take control, and before you realize it, the day is gone. Productivity is not about doing more tasks. It is about doing the right things on purpose. Once you understand that, everything begins to shift. You stop asking how to fit more into your day and start asking what truly deserves your time and energy. That question alone changes how you move through life. Responsibility is what turns awareness into action. Responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for every mistake or feeling guilty when things go wrong. It means ownership. It means recognizing that while you cannot control everything that happens to you, you can control how you respond and what you choose next. When you accept responsibility for your days, you stop waiting for motivation to appear. You stop hoping tomorrow will be better on its own. You begin leading yourself instead of reacting to circumstances. This shift is quiet but powerful. It brings clarity, focus, and direction. You begin to see that small decisions matter. What time you wake up, how you start your morning, whether you delay or begin. These choices shape your habits, and your habits shape your future. Responsibility gives you freedom because it gives you choice. You may not like every option, but you always have one. And when you consistently choose what aligns with your values, confidence begins to grow. Not loud confidence, but steady confidence built on trust in yourself. A productive life is not built overnight. It is built one intentional day at a time, and every day gives you another opportunity to choose direction over drift. Chapter 5. Guard your focus and choose consistency. Guarding your focus begins with understanding that attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. And once it is scattered, even the most disciplined effort loses power. In a world filled with constant stimulation, notifications, messages, headlines, and endless entertainment, focus is no longer automatic. It must be protected. Most people do not intentionally choose distraction, but they allow it by default. They reach for their phones without thinking, jump between tasks, and consume information endlessly, all while feeling increasingly tired and unfulfilled. This constant stimulation fragments attention and weakens the mind's ability to stay with one thing long enough to do meaningful work. Focus is not about trying harder to concentrate. It is about removing what competes for your attention. When your attention is divided, your effort is diluted. 10 minutes of deep focus produces more progress than an hour of distracted work. Guarding your focus means deciding in advance what deserves your attention and what does not. It means creating boundaries around your time, your energy, and your mental space. Without boundaries, your mind is pulled in too many directions, and progress becomes shallow. When you begin protecting your focus, you think more clearly, act more deliberately, and feel more present in your own life, because focus gives depth to everything you do. Choosing consistency is the second half of this pillar, and it requires a shift in how you think about progress. Most people rely on excitement to start. They feel inspired, motivated, and ready, and for a short time, they show up with intensity. But excitement fades quickly. When it does, effort drops, routines break, and progress stops. This is why so many people start strong and finish nowhere. Consistency, not excitement, is what creates real change. Consistency is quiet. It is not thrilling. It often feels repetitive and slow, but it works because it removes dependence on emotion. When you choose consistency, you decide to show up regardless of how you feel. You act according to commitment, not impulse. Impulse-based living feels good in the moment, but weakens long-term progress. Consistency builds identity. Each time you show up, even when effort feels small, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who follows through. That belief compounds over time. Progress is not the result of doing everything perfectly. It is the result of staying engaged long enough for results to appear. Consistency keeps you in the game. It allows small efforts to compound into meaningful change. When you stop chasing excitement and start valuing repetition, you create stability in your habits, clarity in your goals, and confidence in your ability to continue even when progress feels invisible. Guarding focus and choosing consistency also means simplifying your expectations. Many people burn out because they demand perfection from themselves. They believe consistency means giving maximum effort every day. In reality, consistency means never fully stepping away. Some days you will give more. Other days you will give less. Both count. What matters is direction, not intensity. Focus supports consistency by reducing friction. When distractions are limited, effort feels lighter. When routines are simple, showing up feels manageable. Consistency thrives in environments that support it. This is why designing your surroundings, your schedule, and your digital space matters. Over time, consistent focus changes how you experience work, learning, and even rest. You stop feeling scattered. You stop feeling constantly behind. You begin to trust that progress is happening even when it is slow. That trust creates patience. And patience allows you to stay committed long enough to build something real, something that lasts beyond temporary motivation or excitement. Final chapter, recommit daily after setbacks. Progress does not move in a straight line. No matter how disciplined or intentional you become, there will be days when you fall short, days when habits break, days when focus disappears, days when you act in ways that do not align with your standards. These moments do not mean you have failed. They mean you are human. The difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck is not who avoids setbacks. It is who recommits after them. Many people believe discipline means never slipping. That belief quietly destroys progress. Because the moment they miss a day or make a mistake, they assume everything is ruined. One setback becomes an excuse to quit entirely. Recommitting daily means understanding that yesterday does not define you. No matter what happened, today gives you another decision. That decision may feel small, but it carries enormous power. Will you continue, or will you walk away? Growth resumes the moment you choose to continue. You do not need to feel confident to recommit. You only need to decide. That decision shifts you from shame to responsibility, from frustration to forward movement. And that shift is what keeps progress alive. Setbacks often come with guilt and self-criticism, and those emotions can trap you if you allow them to linger. Shame convinces you to wait until you feel worthy again, until conditions improve, or until motivation returns. But waiting only deepens the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Recommitting is an act of self-leadership. It is choosing to act in your best interest, even when you feel disappointed in yourself. You do not need to fix everything before you restart. You only need to take the next step. Momentum is rebuilt through action, not reflection alone. The faster you return after a setback, the less damage is done. One missed day does not need to become a missed week. One mistake does not erase your standards. Recommitting daily shortens the distance between falling off and getting back on. Over time, this builds emotional strength. You stop fearing failure because you trust your ability to recover. That trust creates resilience, and resilience allows you to aim higher without fear of falling. Recommitting daily also changes how you view setbacks. Instead of seeing them as proof that you are inconsistent or incapable, you begin to see them as feedback. They reveal weak systems, unrealistic expectations, emotional triggers, and environmental challenges. When you treat setbacks as information instead of judgment, growth becomes inevitable. You adjust instead of quitting. You simplify instead of abandoning the goal. Consistency is not measured by never failing. It is measured by how often you return. A person who recommits repeatedly is more disciplined than someone who quits at the first sign of difficulty. This mindset removes pressure and replaces it with responsibility. You stop chasing perfection and start practicing persistence. Over time, persistence reshapes identity. You become someone who does not quit on themselves, someone who returns, someone who finishes. That identity is far more powerful than talent or motivation because it survives difficulty and grows stronger through it. The future you want is not built in one flawless run. It is built in hundreds of quiet recommitments, small decisions made after disappointment, actions taken when no one is watching, effort given without excitement or applause. Recommitting daily keeps your standards alive even when effort fluctuates. It reminds you what matters. It realigns your actions with your values. Some days, recommitment will look strong and confident. Other days, it will look slow and cautious. Both count. Direction matters more than speed. You are not behind. You are learning. And learning requires repetition. When you fall, pause briefly, learn what you can, and recommit. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. This moment is always enough to begin again. A productive life is not built by avoiding setbacks. It is built by returning after them. And each time you return, you strengthen the foundation of the life you are intentionally creating, one recommitment at a time.